Day 1287 of the Ukrainian war map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 1,084,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 780 in the past day. Then as for hardware, 1 tank, 4 APVs, 41 artillery, and as for those reduced tank losses seen in most recent times, the latest share of losses data is out for tanks, based on type of loss, which interestingly shows an apparent spike in T-55 main battle tank losses as the war drags on, and Russia finds it more acceptable to reactivate what's left of the especially old Soviet gear. Also bear in mind for this stacked area chart, the left side reflects the early months of war, when Russian tank losses were measured in the hundreds, and by the right side, today, those losses are many times fewer in terms of raw numbers, even if the percentage mix between tank types still shifts around. Now to the map, where Russian regions are lighting up across a wide arc from Smolensk near Moscow to the Black Sea. And as for the south, even Russia's own mill blogger Rybar is not a fan, voicing alarm over the late August through early September Ukrainian UAV and USV strikes on Crimea. He noted that drones were launched from Odessa and Mykolaiv in waves of several dozens, flying at different speeds and altitudes to complicate interception. Rybar had also added that up to 8 Ukrainian naval drones were observed drifting in waiting mode around the Black Sea. Now, as for those unmanned surface vessels that could look something exactly like this, the Magura V7 naval drone, shown off by Ukraine's foreign minister, and being equipped with R-73 missiles, which is a lethal combination that has already carved out a name for itself, becoming the first to down a Russian Su-30 fighter jet from sea. The Magura series forced the Russian Black Sea fleet to largely tuck its tail between its legs and head right on back east to Russia's mainland naval base in Krasnodar, and in doing so, forever rewriting the tactics of war. And then on the map, and not far from that Russian naval base, reports are pointing to fresh explosions at Anapa in Krasnodar Krai. Local monitoring channels stated that a radar site was struck overnight, with Russian sources confirming damage to a radar unit on the hilltop. The exact aftermath is still being clarified, though early claims suggest the site may have included an S-300 air defense division. Then next on the map, overnight, a UAV crashed near the Katinikovo station in Rostov, knocking out voltage in the contact network and damaging a relay system, with the outage leaving dozens of trains stalled across the network. By early morning, Russian railways confirmed that 26 trains had been delayed, leading to no rail movement for the rest of the day, at least up until a few hours ago. So the targeting of such sites is the ultimate asymmetrical attack on supply lines, with even pinpoint delays that can ripple across the entire network. Then next on the map to Siberia, where a Russian Air Force Il-76 military transport aircraft was forced into an emergency landing. According to Russian outlets, the incident occurred shortly after the Il-76 took off from the Krasnoyarsk airport. The crew requested an emergency return landing, but the aircraft careered off the runway in the remote Krasnoyarsk region. This Il-76, a Soviet-era heavy lifter still central to Russia's military, has now, at this point, been under increased strain from high sortie rates linked to the war. So emergency landings involving this platform highlight not only technical wear and tear, but also how Russia is pushing its aging fleet hard to maintain operational cadence. For this event, no casualties have been reported, but the episode adds to a string of recent Russian military aviation mishaps that chip away at Moscow's airlift reliability, a critical backbone for supplying troops across Russia's vast geography and into occupied Ukrainian territory. Now to the main map with most activity, most movements on the ground to be found in the lower Donetsk region, where Russian forces made some incremental gains around the edges of the Tolstoy direction. But as for the main road leading out of Tolstoy itself, is where Ukrainian defense forces pushed back the enemy from their previous assault movements on the main highway that eventually leads to the free city of Zaporizhia. Next up on the map is the Myrnorad direction, just north of here, where as a result of a counteroffensive, fighters of Ukraine's 425th Separate Assault Regiment liberated the central part of the town of Novoekonomichny and further consolidated landing positions across the river into Mirolubivka, and happening at a location that's actually part of the now incredibly long-standing wider garrison that leads to Pokrovsk and Dobropila to the north, making for a location that continues to be a thorn in the side of the Russian army. Meanwhile, nearby to the west, where Ukrainian forces carried out a systematic 2-week assault, clearing the village of Udachna house by house, where the Skala regiment eliminated all Russian positions in the settlement, with the accompanying photos of Ukrainian soldiers raising a flag at this front. It's truly an evolving sector we find here, and where Ukraine's incremental progress, even in grey zone conditions, is aimed at eroding Russian positions and stretching reserves, but added to that while forcing Russia to defend across multiple approaches. And meanwhile, for this wider sector, numerous reports now suggest Russia is preparing a large-scale offensive in the fall, with the main objective being the full occupation of Donetsk. And, well, if that's the case, then they better get a hurry on, because they just blew right past spring and summer, not completing that intended objective, which means that their own expectations for fall would be remarkably high, like a last-minute cram for an exam. Now, we already know that Moscow has already commenced redeploying their so-called elite marine units from the areas of Sumy and the Kherson regions into Donetsk, in the hope that they can make for the winning ingredient they need for the thousands of square kilometers of Ukrainian-held Donetsk. But to do so does also raise the question of what is Kherson and Sumy going to look like, as these reports indicate, especially for the north, that the Sumy direction has lost priority for the Kremlin now, with focus more strictly moved to this central eastern region. Russia wants to have its cake and eat it too, but something's gotta give. Then to the political vector for this region, where Russia regularly states that it's protecting the Russian-speaking population of the Donbass, but in reality, due to intense destruction and mismanagement under occupation, this has led to water shortages in these two eastern regions, Luhansk and Donetsk, which isn't even exactly a new development, as it's been a problem that extends all the way back to the 2014 Donbass invasion. So fast forward to now, and we see locals of the area angry at Russian soldiers for stealing their water, as Russian military personnel do their drive-bys looking for homes with water tanks to steal water from. It's really hard to see any locals in the region protected by Russia whatsoever. Then to look around the map, seen was the spectacular destruction of the Russian 122mm BM-21 Grad multiple rocket launcher, this one coming out of the Luhansk direction. Then next up, but in a different change of pace, because in a world of countless unlucky Russian troops within Ukraine, I sometimes feel a bit moved to show some of the rarer lucky ones, with this case for instance, as a Russian soldier that was riding his motorcycle films a Ukrainian kamikaze drone narrowly missing him in the eastern region's rear. And just take a look at that amazing little winged missile drone. It has a very slender fuselage, straight narrow wings, with its twin boom propeller design, looking like a miniaturized World War II bomber. These fixed wing features gives the platform increased range over that of a quadcopter drone, and by extension also tends to indicate that this near miss was potentially tens of kilometers from the front lines. Ukraine is really cooking up some new designs here. Oh, and also to mention, Russian motor transport in 2025 hasn't gotten any better. Sticking with the two-wheel army design, seen here, one man per wheel on average, getting the most bang for their buck in affordability metrics, but only seen in the lens of a one-way trip. Then also, on the map and from the Russian vantage point again, the picture is far from flattering, with more reports indicating that Russian forces are dismantling their own arsenal to keep the war effort running. In this case, 122mm Grad rockets are being taken apart, with the gunpowder charges inside stripped out and redirected to fill shortages in smoothbore weapons. It's an unmistakable sign of strain, an army digging into its own stockpile for the raw charge to be packed into makeshift follow-ups. Now, it is true to say both sides repurpose non-detonated ordnance from the other side, but to go junkyard raiding on your own stuff is an entirely different story. For Moscow, the workaround highlights a critical supply problem. What was once a strategy of overwhelming firepower, especially for the first 12 months of this war, is now sliding into recycling and repurposing. On the battlefield, it means dwindling consistency in munitions and growing reliance on stopgaps, showing of the sort of solution that highlights just how stretched the system has become. Nothing says superpower like raiding your own munitions. Now to the news, and where Beijing staged its biggest military parade in decades, with Xi Jinping warning that the world stands at a crossroads of peace or war. At the parade, hypersonic missiles, nuclear systems, and swarms of drones rolled through Tiananmen Square, turning the World War II anniversary into a statement of Chinese power and defiance of the West. But the parade doubled as a diplomatic stage. Xi and Vladimir Putin met ahead of the procession, hailing each other as dear friends, as they always do, some variation of that, and signing more than 20 cooperation deals covering energy, trade, and technology. Bit of an odd move for China, given it boasts taking a neutral stance in the Russia-Ukraine war. And then, at this event, everybody's favorite supreme leader, Kim Jong-un, came to town, marking the first appearance at a Chinese military parade in more than 60 years of North Korean leadership history. He stood alongside Xi and Putin, then joined Putin for talks where he reaffirmed North Korea's backing for Russia and accepted an invitation to visit Moscow. But all of these stories were sidelined by a cringeworthy hot mic incident involving Putin and Xi, where their conversation drifted into unscripted territory, into talk of longevity and organ transplants. In this bizarre sideline moment, the two were caught speculating about using organ transplants for eternal life, with Xi reportedly quipping, quote, "People used to rarely live to be 70 years old. Now at 70, you're still considered a child." Then he went on to add that the forecasts are that in this century, there is a chance to live to 150 years old, end quote. Then following up from that, one of Putin's responses included, quote, "Thanks to the development of biotechnology, organs can be transplanted all the time. People can even achieve immortality," end quote. Which, all of this is truly spoken like a couple of dictators chasing the fountain of youth as a means to rule forever. Not surprising at all. And as for those organ transplant comments and achieving immortality made by Putin, well, I guess the world is now just waiting on him to finally book in that brain transplant. So good luck to him with all of that immortality. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!